Story 1. The Living Tattoo. Oh, come on, Mom. I want to see the living tattoo. I wailed. No. I won't have a child of mine subjected to such filth. It's not filth, it's cool. Defacing yourself like some bathroom wall is just disgraceful and disgusting. Oh, Mom, I began to say. No. And that's the last I'll hear of it. With that, she dragged me away from the entrance to the freak show. We spent the rest of the day playing games and riding rides. The smell of cotton candy and pizza filled the air. The bells, whistles, and screams of joy from children having the time of their lives. Any other kid would be overjoyed with all the things we did. But not me. I couldn't get the vision out of my head, the living tattoo. Wherever I went and whatever I did, the sign danced in front of my eyes. It taunted me like a carrot dangling just out of a donkey's reach. I begged and pleaded all day, but my mom would hear none of it. I dragged my feet and screamed like I was being killed whenever we went near the freak show tents. She just dragged me silently, ignoring the stares of people passing by. Instead of remembering a wonderful day at the fair, we were both miserable as she drove us home. But the fair will be gone in 2 days. I wailed as we pulled into our driveway. All I wanted to see was the living tattoo. You're the worst mother ever. That's it, she said while opening the front door. I've had enough. Go straight to your room, and I don't want to see you again until your attitude improves. If it does, will we go to the fair tomorrow? I asked. She pulled at her hair and screamed as she stormed off to the kitchen and slammed the door. Is that a yes? I asked. The door didn't answer. I stumped up the stairs as loud as I could and kicked my bedroom door shut. I threw myself on the bed and crossed my arms. I never get anything I want. I lay there, refusing to move or even turn my light on. My TV, stereo, stack of video games, all held no interest to me. All I could think about was the one thing I couldn't have. Through the window, I could see a glow on the horizon as night fell and the lights from the fair lit the sky. Tomorrow's the last day. I'll have to wait a whole year. From somewhere inside my mind that never spoke, I heard. Unless what? Unless you sneak out and go by yourself. Sure. And how do I do that? She said she didn't want to see you again until your attitude changed. Well, going to the fair changes your attitude, doesn't it? Yes. Then there you go. You're just doing what Mommy wants you to do. A smile crept across my face as I slid out through my window. I snuck in through a hole in the fence and came face to face with a carny. What do you think you're doing, boy? He asked through his 3 visible teeth. Nothing, I said and started walking away. Wait a minute. I know you. My blood ran cold. Yeah, you're that brat that was whining at your mom today. I'm not a brat. Excuse me, Your Highness. I turned to leave. I can get you in to see him. I stopped. Who? I asked. The living tattoo. I froze in place and slowly turned. You can do that? Follow me. He led me down a path that ran behind the tents. It was a different world back here. Squalor was the norm. Ragged people were laying on lawn chairs, if they were lucky. More often than not, they just lay on the ground. Tin cans with rotted food, empty bags of popcorn, and discarded tubes for cotton candy were strewn everywhere. Entire armies of ants crawled over everything and everybody. He led me up to a large, dark tent with a cigar store Indian sitting outside of it, then stopped. There's only one question I need to ask first. What do you mean? How much do you want to go inside? What? How desperate are you to see? What would you give to go inside this tent? Anything, I replied. He smiled his 3 crooked teeth. That's the right answer. He pulled back the flap and disappeared inside. I followed and was immediately overwhelmed by darkness. A musty smell hung heavy in the air. I thrust my hands out in front of me, feeling my way as I drowned in the pitch black. Just as suddenly as the light had left, it reappeared. Torches lit the way to the center of the room. My eyes adjusted to the inside of the tent. Strange shadow creatures hovered at the edge of the light. The flames danced hungrily in their eyes. Panic washed over me, and I turned to leave. What's this? The carny said, blocking my exit. You ain't leaving without seeing him, not after all the fuss you put up about it. I'm not sure my mom would like me to be here alone, I replied. No, of course she wouldn't. That's the whole point, isn't it? You wanted to show her who's boss. His crooked smile was tinged with something else I couldn't place. Come on, then. Up you go. He gave me a little push toward the raised platform in the middle of the room where a large figure sat motionless, totally covered by a black cloak. The carny guided me around to the front where I could see him. The intricate pictures that covered every inch of his face were mesmerizing. A one-eyed pirate being impaled by a sword, a beautiful scantily clad woman, a strange symbol I'd never seen before. They all drew me closer. I found myself a hand's breadth away from him. His eyes were pitch black, yet did not reflect the light of the torches. Well, there you go, the carny said. You wanted to see him, and here he is. For the first time, his eyes blinked. I nearly jumped off my skin. I lurched back, but the carny caught me and held me fast. He's heard all about you, of course. You and that little show you put on today. He's wanted to meet you ever since. What? Why? I stammered. He's never met someone so selfish, so unconcerned about anyone else. He wanted to know how you do it. Do what? I asked. Ignore every feeling of right and wrong inside you. Ignore the woman who gave you life. Ignore the common sense that God gave even a rat, just so you could have your own way. I glanced back at the carny with contempt, and then I looked again. The pirate wasn't staring at the woman anymore. He was staring at me. They wanted to see you too. The living tattoo untied a knot at his neck, and the cloak fell away. Nothing covered his body except for tattoos and a pair of briefs. Artistic masterpieces overflowed from one to the other. Textures so deep, it seemed like no artist could possibly achieve. And they were all looking at me. Each mythological creature, human, alien, even the symbols seemed to somehow stare. My blood ran cold, and I began to shiver. He stepped forward and wrapped his cloak around me. Suddenly, the shivering stopped. I felt warm again. I felt exhilarated. He reached out and took my hand and pulled me close and whispered with a voice that sounded like 1,000 together. Release me. I tried to let go of his hand, but he still held me in an iron grip. My mouth refused to open. My mind was a whirlwind. I couldn't think. As we stood face to face, hands still clasped, one of his tattoos moved. A tiny horse and chariot carrying a Roman soldier galloped down to the edge of his finger and disappeared. My jaw dropped open, but no words came out. My mind reeled when the horse and chariot suddenly appeared on my hand. I watched in shock as they rode up my arm and disappeared beneath my sleeve. The floodgates opened, and all the other tattoos followed suit. A sea of green flowed up my arm, disappearing under my clothes until there was no more room, and they flooded onto my face. While I watched my body being invaded by living pictures, I didn't notice my counterpart still held my hand. He had shrunk several inches while I had grown. His eyes were no longer inky pools of soulless black, they were green. The same as mine. In fact, his face was the same one I saw in the mirror each morning. His skin was milky white, just like mine used to be. Not a mark or blemish remained. My doppelganger in the carny took my clothes and put them on him, then wrapped me in the cloak. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I was dragged down into the chair, unable to move. My new tattoos left and carried on as though the clock had just struck 12 on December 31st. They mocked me and cheered at me as Johnny walked back through the torches and out of the tent. Sleep eluded me that night. The figures on my skin moved all night. It was like a colony of ants constantly crawling over every inch of my body. I tried scratching once. The pirate scratched over, reared back, and stabbed me with a sword. Unbelievable pain shot through my face. The rest of the night, I just did my best not to go insane from the itching, but I never scratched again. The next day held a fresh hell. Sleep was a luxury that had eluded me. My torment was to live the nightmare of each tattoo. I was held down by the weight of my inky damnation, unable to move or even speak. Unfortunately, I could still see the children who passed through, wearing looks of shock and admiration. I could also feel the scorn of the mothers who hid their child's eyes and quickly moved on at the sight of me. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, in walked little Johnny with my mom holding his hand. She looked at me with the same scorn I'd seen on the other mothers' faces. Honestly, I don't know why you wanted to see this so badly. You'll have nightmares for weeks, she said to him. Don't worry, Mom. I think I'll sleep better than I have in a long time, he told her, in my voice. She hurried him away, repulsed by the sight of me. You just better not have any ideas of getting a tattoo of your own, she said to him, walking away. He glanced back at me. I wouldn't dream of it. I bowed my head as he walked out with my mother, never to return. A tear formed in my black eyes when I noticed a new tattoo on my arm. It was a small boy with green eyes. Story 2. The Creepy Daycare. Okay, my friend told me this story, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. He and a friend were out on a creek fishing, one they weren't really familiar with, and they started to go downstream to look for a better spot. Mind you, they're far away from any town, and there are no houses nearby. They suddenly come up to a clearing that has a dome-shaped building that is dilapidated and can barely be seen under all the brush and trees. Of course, curiosity got the best of them, and they decided to take a peek. Upon going inside, there are lots of strange, random items. As they venture further through the building, they come upon coffins that were very small, like for children or infants. They started to get really creeped out, but they continued exploring. They then come across a heavy door that leads into a painted room in extremely bright colors, with pictures on the wall kind of similar to a daycare or preschool. And all around the room was wrapped in layers and layers of chicken wire, and it was done in a way not to keep someone from getting in, but to keep them from getting out. At that point, they were so creeped out they had to get the hell out of there. When they made it home, they told one of their girlfriends what happened, and she called the police to report it because she was so freaked out. They never heard anything from the police about it, and they moved shortly after. My friend says it's been on his mind ever since then, and whenever he talks about it, you can see from his reaction that he's genuinely freaked out. And I also want to say that he isn't scared easily. Story 3. The Mysterious Workers. I was woken up today by drilling and went downstairs. I saw two guys with a ladder drilling the wall in the corridor between the back door and the garage door. I didn't know what they were doing, but when I came back, one of them just asked if the front light needed doing or not. I said I didn't know. I just assumed that my stepdad had arranged for them to come around. My brother was here too, and he let them in. I didn't ask him who they were, and since he didn't have a problem, I assumed he knew about them. So I went back upstairs and took an assessment for my new job, but I fell asleep halfway through. Later, at around 5 p.m., my mom came back from work and asked why the kitchen floor was dirty. I said some guys were doing something with the lights. She was confused because she didn't know anything about anyone coming to do work that day. I said I assumed that stepdad had arranged them. Then my stepdad came back from work, and he didn't know about them either. So, according to everyone, there were just two random guys with a ladder and a drill replacing the lights in our house, or something. My stepdad asked why I didn't phone him because I'm always on my phone. I told him I guess he knew about them, and my brother was here too and spoke to them, so I thought he would have known about them. He said we didn't have half a brain between us, and my mom said they could have been burglars or anyone, and we just left them to it. I guess the men could have gotten my house and the neighbor's house opposite mixed up because the way my street is, both houses are number 46, but the street name changes on the bend. So I'm always telling delivery people and other people that come to my house that they're looking for the house opposite. I'm not proud of any of this. Story 4. The mugging that saved me. I have a big family, and we're really close. When I was in high school, my aunt was dating this guy who seemed really wealthy, but no one really knew what he did. I think anyone could have guessed, though. I asked my aunt to introduce me to her boyfriend, and we talked about how I could work for him. Without going into too much detail, he let me work for him. I sold to some people I knew. I went to high school in an area where there was a lot of drugs. I knew a few boys who claimed they were already using this stuff. I offered to sell it to them, and surprisingly, they had really big orders from me. I didn't ask any questions, I just went along with it. I was making about $3,000 a month from this, not enough to retire or anything, but definitely more than most 17-year-olds made. I never made a point to flaunt my money or anything. I think I kept it well hidden, at least, I thought I did. What bothers me is that there's no way of knowing. One Saturday morning, I walked over to my friend's house for a birthday party, not a wild one or anything, just a cute little breakfast. On my way home, this guy I'd never seen before pulled over and got out of the car. He was well dressed and a bit older. When he got out of his car, I thought he was a cop. He was acting like a cop. I was ready to surrender because I didn't think I could make an escape. But then he pulled out a switchblade and said to give him my purse. He said something like, "Don't act dumb, girl. I know you have money. It's okay, we can make this easy if you just give me your purse." Again, I can't really explain this, but that just felt like such a cop-like thing to say. I don't know if you've ever been in that kind of situation. I hope you haven't, but you kind of just freeze when someone surprises you like that. It's not really fear, your body doesn't know how to react. I almost think my body didn't let me get too scared because if it did, then I'd have a heart attack. It's like my body said, wait until it's safe, then panic. First, I think I felt relieved that he wasn't actually a cop. Thank goodness for that. Second, when he said it was okay and that we could make it easy, it actually calmed me down a bit. So I managed to say, "Okay, can I just give you my cash? My purse is my phone and pictures and other stuff." He said okay to that. I opened my purse and took out all the cash I had, about $200. He watched me closely as I did it. He took the money, said something like, "If you tell anyone, I will find out," and he left. I felt really calm the rest of my walk home. The next morning, it hit me that I'd been mugged. That's when the panic set in. I started shaking and crying. Even as I'm writing this story now, it gives me chills. I'd never seen that guy before. When he said, "I know you have money," I don't know if he meant he knew about my dealing or if he was just trying to scare me. Honestly, I'm really glad this all happened because it made me get out of that business at the right time. Things were only going to get more dangerous from there. It's still scary thinking about it, but that guy saved me without even realizing it. I told my aunt's boyfriend what happened and that I was too scared to keep doing this trade anymore. He told me to send all of my customers to him instead. I did that, and that was the end of it for me. It's been almost 10 years now, and I haven't looked back. Story 5. The Stalker on the Beach. Hi there. I've told a few of my friends this story before, and I did get advice about posting it on here by a few friends, so let's begin. I was about 13 when this happened, and I lived right on the beach. If you walked about 1.5 kilometers down the beach from my house, you would get to a place where some ocean water would be left behind to form sort of a lake where a lot of my friends and myself liked to hang out. Next to it were 2 dirt roads. Anyways, I had a German Shepherd, and my mother used to kick me out of the house every weekend for a few hours to go play with the dog, which I didn't mind. There was a cliff above the beach which you could take to walk to the lake, which was overlooking the beach but covered in forest. On that day in particular, it was hot, so I chose to spare the dog a hot walk, and we took a walk up in the forest. I've done this many times before and wasn't afraid at all. As I was walking, I hear muffled footsteps behind me. My dog was up far ahead of me, off leash, and I quickly realized that someone had to be sneaking up behind me because it was near impossible to walk on the dry foliage silently here. I quickly made a run for it to the exit of the forest, seemingly hearing the footsteps become audible behind me. No worries, I was out at the lake now. It was plain open, and I could already spot a girlfriend of mine there. My dog was already in the water. As I went to greet my friend, we noticed a large man approach us. He must have been close to 6 feet 5 inches and very slim. He started talking to us both very kindly, and without knowing any better, we were polite back to him. At the time, I did not associate the footsteps with this man, but later grew to. He asked a lot about us, where we were from, if anyone was here with us, and so on. Slowly, my friend and I got creeped out. We said our goodbyes, saying we had to go on off to meet our other friends, and moved to a further distance down the lake. We sat down for a bit and started talking when my dog started growling. She never used to growl, so this took me by surprise. I looked to see what she was growling at, and lo and behold, the man was standing around 50 meters behind us. My friend and I had caught on now and moved again. The same thing happened, except he was closer now. We were getting freaked out. We were being followed, and we were all alone. My friend called her mother to come pick us up, although she was at least an hour away. That meant we were stuck with this creep for an hour or so. Oh, the joy! The more we moved, the more he came closer. I had leashed my dog by now as she was going completely rabid at this man. Every time we looked at him, he smiled back at us as if we were some sort of close friends. He tailed us for a while until we saw my friend's mother's car arrive at the dirt road. Now, this road was about 200 meters from us, and to get there, we had to cross where the man was standing. We were terrified. Her mother saw the situation. She started running over, which caught the man's attention, and that meant it was our time to dash. I don't think there's any time in my life that I've ever run that far that fast. My dog was running with us as I've let her leash go. When we got to the car, we hastily got in as the man ran toward us. We stayed in the car while my friend's mother called 112, and we waited inside. The man was throwing rocks at us and wailing at us, eventually running off as the police arrived. When the police arrived, they questioned everyone and went looking for the man, but they never found him. I'm still terrified he's in that forest, waiting for me. I did not know that on that day that my friend would be there. I'm not sure what would have happened if she wasn't. I didn't have a phone or any form of contact, and I'm pretty sure that if he would have gotten to me, he would have won against my dog. So, to the creepy man who stalked me and tried to catch my friend and I, let's not meet again. Story 6. The intruder in my car. I used to do DoorDash on the side just for some extra cash, nothing too crazy, until a few months ago when something happened that I still can't stop thinking about. And to be honest, I haven't done a single delivery since. It was around 11 p.m., and I was finishing up my last order for the night. The delivery was in a quiet, upscale LA neighborhood, nothing too out of the ordinary. I pull up, leave the car running like I always do, grab the food, and drop it off. Super normal, no weird vibes from the customer or anything. But as I walk back to my car, something feels off. I can't explain it, but the air felt heavier, like I could sense something was wrong before I even got to the door. I get in the driver's seat, close the door, and glance in the rearview mirror. That's when I see him. There's a guy sitting in my back seat, just sitting there, hoodie pulled low over his face, completely still. My heart stopped. I was frozen, staring at him through the mirror, trying to figure out how the hell he got into my car. I managed to stammer out, "Can I help you?" And that's when he leans forward just a little, and I can finally see his eyes. They were wide and bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. He leans back and, in the calmest voice, says, "Drive." I don't know why, but I did. I started driving, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. He didn't say anything else, just sat there completely calm while I drove through these dark streets. And I'm just freaking out inside, thinking, this is it. This is how I'm going to get robbed or worse. Then he tells me to turn down a side street. It's dark, barely any street lights, and I'm just thinking, this is where it's going to go down. But right as we approach a gas station, well lit, a few people around, I slam on the brakes, throw the car in park, and jump out screaming for help. The gas station clerk runs out, and I'm yelling that there's a guy in my back seat. But when we go back to the car, it's empty. The guy was gone, no sign of him anywhere. He just vanished. I have no idea how he got out so fast or where he went, but I didn't care. I got back in my car, locked the doors, and drove straight home. I've replayed that night over and over in my head, and it still doesn't make sense. That was months ago, and I haven't touched the DoorDash app since. I don't know if I ever will. It's not worth risking something like that happening again. Story 7. The Misunderstood Stalker. This story is fresh, as it just happened a few minutes ago. I will try my best to give you all the details. So, I'm a Pokemon Go player. I was a mild fan of the franchise as a kid, and now, in my mid-20s, I find that it allows me to get out of the house more often and do something that doesn't involve, well, my house. If you've played the game, you know that there are these places called gymnasiums where you can place one of your Pokemon to earn you a max of 50 in-game coins per 24 hours. These coins can buy important in-game items as well as cosmetic items. And you may have guessed it, it's quite the popular feature in the game. However, since I live in a huge European city, there are many players to compete with in order to secure a spot at these gyms. The reason I'm telling you all of this is to let you know why in the world I would brave the cold winter of my metropolitan city at 3 a.m. You see, it's not just that I'm stupid. It's also because I know most folk are asleep, which in turn allows me to quickly defeat all the Pokemon in a gym and place my own. I have been doing this for a few months and have been quite successful. So tonight, the routine was the same. I got dressed, got my coat, my scarf, and my black leather gloves. I went out and made my way to the first of the 3 gyms in my area that I usually conquer in the game. It's actually quite fascinating to observe the people that wander the city at these hours. Well, tonight, I was going to meet a special guy. I arrive at my first gym, which is in a smallish street that curves to the right for quite a stretch. I empty it and place my own Pokemon inside. Afterwards, I linger around the area, taking off a glove to scratch my hand, but overall just managing the game and looking things up. Some cars go by, and that's when I see him. This guy, clearly over 180 centimeters, making his way down the street. Now, these are just my country's standards, but everything about him screamed thug ready to knife you. Sporting a black cap at night, concealing his face with the shadow, padded black jacket with dirty blue jeans, and rip-off Timberland boots. My immediate reaction was to keep it cool and neutral and just calmly place my cell phone back in my pocket. As he went past me, he gave me this "what the hell are you looking at" look, and I couldn't help but give back a small sideways glance as I put my glove back on my hand. I started walking towards the next gym, which happened to be in the same direction he was walking toward, and he, to my surprise, started speeding up. Then he pulled out his cell phone and tried to phone someone. This immediately reminded me of my girlfriend, as this is a common tactic she uses when she feels like she's being followed by strangers. Whoever he tried to phone, however, did not pick up. He looks back at me, keeps walking increasingly faster. He switches sides and starts walking in the middle of the road, effectively distancing himself further and allowing the parked cars to get between him and me. And then, abruptly, he stops. He turns around and asks, "Hey, friend, how can I find transportation at this hour?" I'm awkward out and freaking out at the same time, so without even looking at him, I just said, "At this hour, only Uber." He starts walking only when I walk past him. Then it hit me. From my perspective, he was a thug-looking dude that could have very well tried to rob me and also potentially harm me. But from his perspective, I'm a 171 centimeters guy in his mid-20s that for some reason decided to pocket his phone the moment he went past me, then gave him a sideways "what the hell are you looking at" glance as he put on a black leather glove and started following him with not a single person awake around, looking like a hitman or a serial killer. As anxious as I was, he must have been terrified enough to try to phone someone, or at least pretend to, and then initiate dialogue with a total stranger at 3 a.m. just to be sure that I wasn't a psycho about to knife him. We walked together in the same direction for almost 10 minutes after that without looking or talking to one another, just 2 awkward guys who didn't want to meet one another ever again. So, thug guy, I won't follow you like a serial killer, and you won't meet me ever again. Story 8. The Mysterious Car. I'm from Gaithersburg, Maryland, and back in 2018, I had a part-time job up in Silver Spring. I didn't have a car, so I'd have to take 2 buses to get to downtown Silver Spring. The commute was about an hour each way, and I worked nights, so on weekends, I'd get out especially late, around 11:30 p.m. or so. Buses stopped running around midnight, so I'd usually manage to catch the first one, but if I was unlucky, I'd have to walk home from the second station. The second station was Shady Grove Metro, which wasn't too bad since it was just up the road from my neighborhood, a 1.5 mile walk. The sidewalk ran alongside a usually busy intersection and highway, but at this hour, it was dead quiet. I was 18 at the time, and I always had my headphones in, completely unafraid of my surroundings. That was, until this encounter. Halfway through the walk home, I was about to cross a large intersection when a lone car drove past me, went a little further up the road, and then stopped, opening its passenger side door. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming someone was just getting dropped off. Montgomery County is generally a safe place, so I didn't feel any immediate concern. But as I kept walking, I noticed something odd. No one was stepping out. And the inside of the car was deathly black, like you couldn't even see any glowing knobs, a radio, Apple Play, nothing. The normal car lights that usually turn on when you open a door were turned off, or just didn't have any. I tried to make sense of the situation. Was this a taxi or an Uber stopping to see if I wanted a ride? But there were no markings, stickers, or anything on the car that indicated it was a taxi or an Uber. Maybe it was an acquaintance offering a lift. I knew various people around the neighborhood, but I didn't recognize this car, and no one was calling out to me. Finally, I started feeling sketched out. I stopped walking, quickly glanced behind me to make sure no one was sneaking up, and then looked back at the car. It dawned on me that I could easily be snatched up and kidnapped here without a single witness. It was 12:30 at night on a deadly silent highway intersection. My fight or flight instinct kicked in. I puffed out my chest and tried to look intimidating, hoping that would deter whoever was in the car. A tense minute passed with no movement from me and no sign of life from the car. Then, finally, the passenger door shut, and the car drove off into the night. I walked the rest of the way home with my headphones out, more aware of my surroundings than ever. I was only 18 then. I'm 25 now, but I still think about that encounter to this day. Was this a potential kidnapper? A human trafficker? A murderer? Or could it have been something even stranger, like a paranormal encounter? Story 9. Ghosts are real. I can't believe what just happened. Okay, so let me start off by saying that I've never really been sure about the afterlife. I'm one of those I have to see it to believe it kind of people. But my parents tell me that when I was really young, I used to see ghosts. They say that at one point, I got so scared, I asked all the ghosts to go away until I was 30. I don't remember any of this, so I always assumed I just had a vivid imagination. Apparently, it worked. They stopped showing up immediately. Well, I turned 30 last year. About 6 months into the year, they came back. Well, one did. I couldn't sleep. I was just laying there awake, and I figured I'd get up and walk around the house a bit. You know when you get that feeling that someone is standing right behind you? I had it so strongly, and I just assumed it must be my roommate behind me. I think I felt the floorboards move a little. That's how I knew someone was there. So I turned around, fully expecting it to be my roommate. But it wasn't. It was this shadow in the shape of a person, like a person just made out of darkness. They were about a foot shorter than me, and they looked pretty large in weight. I just stood there, looking at them, kind of dumbfounded. I remember saying, "Oh my God." I guess they were looking at me because they paused for a moment, then they walked around me. I turned as they walked around me and watched them head towards the stove. Once they got to the stove, they vanished into thin air. So I just can't believe this. After all these years, I finally know the truth. Ghosts are real. Maybe an afterlife is even real. You think I would be scared, but I'm actually really excited. I kind of want to see more of them, and I hope they show up again soon. I guess I've always been a bit of a weirdo that way. I've never been afraid of the dark or typical things that other people are afraid of. I wonder if I'm supposed to be a medium or something. Does anyone have any tips on how to pursue this and strengthen my abilities? Also, has anyone else seen one? Did they look like a shadow person to you, too? Story 10. The Stalker. This is a long one, but it was so bizarre I think it's worth telling. I wanted to post it because this person recently tried to friend my now husband on Facebook, and it brought back crazy memories, and I need to vent it out. I got married right at 18. I was a pretty book-smart kid but lacked street smarts. By the time I turned 20, My now ex-husband and I had moved into a rental property in a pretty nice suburb outside Chicago. In the basement of the house was a big mother-in-law suite where a good male friend of ours, Nick, lived as well. I was about halfway through nursing school at this time. This particular semester of nursing school, I had a very early clinical rotation once a week. I was 21 at the time. I'm not a morning person, so in order to maximize the amount of time I spent asleep, I started loading all my stuff into my car the night before, bags, books, and even my purse. Again, street smarts lacking. One particular night before clinicals, I asked my ex-husband, Bobby, to get a book from my car. Bob does but forgets to lock the door. The next morning when I get to my car, I note that my purse is gone. I ended up filing a police report. I was most concerned because I had just gotten this new job as a nurse's aide in a hospital, and I had my social security card still sitting in my wallet. Strike 3 for street smarts. Almost immediately after the theft, strange things start to happen. We started getting ding-dong ditches all hours of the day and night. Someone vandalized mine, Nick's, and Bob's cars with strange graffiti, egged our house, slashed Nick's tires. We first chalked it up to neighborhood pranksters, but when we started having damages that cost some decent money, we called the police. Not to mention, one day when Bob was mowing the lawn, he noticed piles of cigarette butts outside the bedroom window. The police came out, pretty much did nothing but take a report, and told us to perhaps invest in car alarms and some brighter floodlights for the driveway. A few weeks after this, at 2:30 in the morning, I get a call on my cell phone. It was the police in a neighboring town. They'd picked up someone who had my ID on him, someone named Craig J. When he asked why he had someone else's ID on him, he claimed I was his girlfriend. The cop called me because my name had popped up that I'd filed a police report for theft. I assured the cops I'd never heard of him before and was told that I could pick up my ID at the police station within the next few days. Things really started to escalate at that point, but I still didn't make the connection that perhaps these incidents were related. I started getting strange messages on MySpace, this was in 2009, as well as on Facebook from clearly fake accounts, with long-winded messages that made no sense. This person started messaging friends of mine as well. I deleted MySpace and blocked the person on Facebook, but new accounts kept getting created. Somehow, this person got my email address and started sending emails as well. I had no idea who this person could be, but they seemed to know details about me that indicated that this was either someone I knew or knew someone I knew. The messages weren't overtly threatening but creepy enough to where I started becoming uncomfortable. One night, my friend Lauren and I were sitting on the couch watching TV. Bob, Lauren's husband, and a few other friends had gone out for the night. As we're sitting around chilling, we hear something that sounds like someone shaking the garage door. It was an attached garage. I go and check the garage, nothing seems out of the ordinary. We had occasional issues with raccoons, so I chalked it up to that. But the noise kept continuing. Lauren and I are getting freaked out at this point. Now, understand the layout of the house was a modern-style ranch house with no upstairs. The garage sounds moved now to the kitchen window, a distinct sound of someone knocking or scratching hard on the windows. We call our husbands, who did not answer. At this point, we debate calling the police. What if it's an animal or tree branches? We don't want to seem stupid. As we debate, I see Lauren's face go sheet white and look past me. I spin around, and I can see the lock fortunately, but the handle to the front door is wiggling. We were seated near the kitchen. We jump up. Lauren grabs a knife from the butcher block on the counter. I grab a small hammer from the junk drawer. We book it to the back of the house where the bedrooms are, cell phone in hand, and lock ourselves in one of the bedrooms and then call the police. The dispatcher tells us to stay on the line, Move furniture in front of the door if possible, and the police are on the way. We shove a dresser in front of the door. Knife and hammer in hand, we agreed if this was going to come in, might be bigger or stronger than us, but we're not going down without a fight. We plan, if he gets in before the cops, I go for the head with a hammer, she goes for the gut with the knife. Cops show up, banging on the front door, shouting police. We can see the red and blue lights through the window. We leave the room, let the cops in. They find no signs of anyone present or evidence of an attempted break-in. They take a report. In the meanwhile, our husbands finally call us back. They come home, and the cops leave. Fast forward a few months. A very close friend of ours, Sean, was renovating his apartment and needed a place to crash, along with his girlfriend. Bob and I decided they could stay in a third bedroom in our house. The first night Sean stayed with us, we're woken up at 2 a.m. by Sean screaming at someone. Bob and I jump out of bed and rush into the hall. We run to Sean's room. Sean and his girlfriend are wide awake, lights on, looking totally freaked out. The screen is sliced and flopping in the wind. Sean told us he woke up to someone using what he thought was a knife on the screen and started climbing in through the window. We call the cops. They come out and take a statement. Sean describes the guy as best as he could, a white male, young-looking, semi-shaved head with what looked like darker hair. Cops dust for fingerprints. It comes back as a match for Craig J. Turns out, I knew who he was, vaguely. He was a year younger than me, and we'd gone to the same high school, but I couldn't remember having any significant interactions with him. He lived with his parents only a few blocks from my parents' house. I ended up reaching out to high school acquaintances who knew him, and they remembered him as the nice but odd kid, kind of quiet, definitely on the strange side, who had dropped out of school before graduation. Upon realizing that Sean had just moved in, the cop made a statement that chilled us all. He probably didn't realize anyone was staying in this bedroom and thought the room would be empty. Cops go there, arrest him. He suddenly is quite the story for them. Him and I were secret lovers. I was ignoring him. We had a relationship. He also had been allowed into my home many times. I am floored. He gets charged with something like trespassing or breaking and entering and does light time for it, maybe a month, and he has to pay a fine. In the meanwhile, I get a restraining order on him. He gets out, and I hear nothing from him. I also develop a completely irrational fear of first-floor windows. Around Christmas of 2010, I'm now 23. I figure the whole Craig thing is in the past. Bob and I decide to divorce, unrelated to this, and we go our separate ways. Nick has long since moved out. We end the lease. I move to a less desirable suburb with affordable rent. I settle on an apartment in a 4-unit building that had a locked entrance, and the only way in was with a key or with someone opening the door from the inside. I lived on the 2nd floor. By this time, I had graduated and was now a nurse and was working now at a nursing home. In spring to summer of 2011, it started up again. Calls coming through to me at work, only to have someone hang up. Letters suddenly appeared in the staff mailbox mailed to me with no return address. The strange emails started up again from random accounts. Messages were never overtly threatening, but they were long, way too frequent, way too out there. He spoke to me as if we were long-lost friends and had some sort of connection. I don't think he ever threatened to hurt me, although the cutting into the house with a knife, I don't know what was going through his mind. But I kind of seemed to piece together over the years from all his rambling is that he had some sort of crush on me when I was younger, although I never remember even speaking to him during high school, and him happening to rob my car was some sort of sign from the universe or something that we were meant to be together. I called the cops. They basically tell me that because there have been no threats and other than an order of protection or a cease and desist, there's not much more that they can do except watch and wait. This goes on for a while. And finally, one night, I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to the doorbell ringing. I'm instantly in a panic. I look out the windows. There, illuminated in the floodlight, is Craig, where I burst out crying in my half-awake state. I run across the hall and start banging on my neighbor's door. He was an older divorced guy who lived alone. He goes downstairs, confronts Craig, and tells him the cops have been called, and I actually did call the cops. He takes off. I file a report. They claim they will talk to him, but this only makes things worse. Friends I have on Facebook now start getting random messages from Craig asking about me, telling them he has important information for me. Other times, he alternates saying that I owe him money and I have a debt I need to pay off. My friends block him as he goes along. Meanwhile, my younger sister is living in the city with a few friends. He somehow finds out where and drives to her apartment and confronts her while she has people over. She freaks out. They kick him out. She calls the cops, who basically again state that he didn't commit a crime but offer her a restraining order. Right after this, another incident. My younger cousin is a high school senior on the cross-country team. He shows up at my cousin's practice. My cousin has no clue who he is. He starts demanding information on me. The coach gets involved. Craig gets in a fight with the coach. The cops are called. He's banned from school grounds, but nothing more. He calls the nursing home administrator at my job, asking him to talk to me and that he has important information to tell me. The administrator, my work was now aware of the situation, tells him not to come onto the property or he will have him arrested for trespassing. At this point, I'm paranoid beyond measure. Then, just as quickly as it started, it faded off. It's now summer of 2012, and the final capper in this saga. I'm almost 25 now. A friend of mine named Stacy, and incidentally Sean's ex, moved in with me temporarily while she looked for a place. She was dating a new guy and spent quite a few nights at his place. One day, I picked up a double shift starting at 7 a.m. and ending at 11:30 p.m. Stacy texts me around 3:30 p.m. stating she won't be home that night and was going out with her guy. I arrived home at almost midnight. The first thing I notice is that the door is unlocked. Uneasy, but thinking perhaps Stacy had just forgotten to lock it, I cautiously peer inside. I pan my gaze to the kitchen and living room. I can't shake the feeling that I'm unsettled. Something wasn't sitting right. Due to all of these incidents, I always made sure that 1 or 2 lights were on even when we weren't home. I was still not even fully in the door when I noticed that I was staring into a pitch-black apartment, and immediately my brain went into full panic, and I'm glad it did. Realistically, Stacy could have forgotten to leave a light on, but my instincts were in overdrive and sounding off 5 fire alarm bells. My Puerto Rican neighbor, who lived in one of the building units, was known for his weekend parties, and I could hear a party going on downstairs. I book it down the stairs and bust into the party and I tell him what happened. He looks at me like I'm crazy but agrees to come upstairs with me. We get inside. He looks around. We see nobody. I'm starting to wonder if I'm just nuts. Maybe Stacy had her boyfriend over, and they left in a hurry, forgetting to turn on the low lights and lock the door. He agrees with me and sort of jokingly pulls open the pantry door. What I saw next will never ever leave my mind. There, crouched inside his crate, is Craig. My Puerto Rican neighbor puts the guy in a chokehold. I call the police. To this day, I have no idea what he planned on doing. The cops come out, and he's arrested. Because my neighbor was having a party, he had left the door open to the alleyway. Chances are, he just walked into the building, and if anyone even noticed, people would just assume he was there for the party or whatever. It's more confusing how he got into the apartment itself. My theory is my roommate at the time was from the country. While I lived in a suburb, it was the type of suburb right on the edge of a major US city, so we always locked our doors and generally kept everything secure as a rule. She was used to having her doors unlocked and wide open, and I think honestly it may have just slipped her mind when she went out the door for the night. I confronted her about it, and she of course denied it, but that's really the only logical way he could have gotten in. I always locked both the knob lock and the deadbolt whenever I left the house. Unless he was a skilled locksmith, I have no idea how he could have gotten in. I didn't stay alone or go anywhere by myself for a long time after that. I feel that I've actually developed a paranoia because of all of this and was highly suspicious of giving my number or any information out to anyone. He ended up being charged and convicted of aggravated stalking, breaking and entering, and some other charges. I did meet his parents in court, who were both shockingly very normal, apologetic people. They tried explaining their son. They claimed he was mentally ill and suffered from bipolar disorder. When he's medicated, he's okay. When he's off his meds, he's nuts. They said after he served time, I did not hear from him for years, until 2016, and he found me on Facebook. I was much older now, around 29. I replied to him very firmly that any contact would end in the police being called, that I had no interest in him at all. I blocked him in any way I could. Recently, he found my new husband on Facebook and friended him. He blocked him as well. To this day, I still have a paranoia. I'd parked my car near a baseball diamond once, and some kids, most likely, hit a baseball into my windshield and took off because I had a perfectly baseball-sized spider crack on the glass. Despite it being completely logical that it most likely was a ball, I instantly reverted to, oh God, is he back? I have no idea what happened to him. I also am now a total psycho about keeping things locked. Twice my life got screwed up because doors weren't locked, my car door and most likely my apartment door. I have an acquaintance monitor him on Facebook. His page is not private, and from what I have seen, he appears to go through periods where he's pretty inactive and then episodes where he's rambling, overposting, oversharing, and acting generally deranged. I believe his parents were telling the truth when they stated when he's medicated, he's okay. Part of me feels bad for him. I'm older now, and I've been a nurse for almost 10 years, some of which time was spent in psych specialty. The mind is a hell of a thing. Looking back though, those were some of the worst years of my adult life. He put me through a lot of anxiety and caused a lot of issues for me. I slept with my couch pressed against my apartment door for the next 2 years before I moved out of there. I'm now married, but on nights where I'm home alone, I still find myself resisting the urge to stack furniture in front of the doors. One of the other fallouts from this situation, Craig either sold, lost, or gave away my social security card that had been in my purse. Someone tried to file for Medicaid benefits in Arizona using my name and social, as well as obtained a job using my social, and failed to pay any taxes, leaving me with a surprise asset freeze by the IRS and a whole financial mess that needed to be untangled before they unfroze my accounts and paid me back the money they started to pull out of my paychecks for the back taxes I had nothing to do with. My credit got extremely messed up for years because of it, and to this day, I have a lock on my social security number and monitor my accounts like a hawk. Moral of the story: never leave your purse in the car. Always lock your doors.